Thank you, Vikrant. Uh, it is a privilege to introduce the speaker and the Pranjal Group today. The Pranjal Group, the Pranjal Advisory Firm is a prominent professional service group headquartered in Mumbai, operating a network of entities providing services in the field of investment banking, stress asset resolution, debt syndication, and corporate advisory. The group is founded by Mr. Gautam Jain and Sampath Jain 37 years ago, and has expanded to a team of 85 professionals spanning across 6 locations, having catered to more than 800 clients, including and concluding the transaction of around 35,000 crores. The group has its roots in the philosophy that the business must be contribute back to the social ecosystem in which it operates and thrives. For this purpose, the group has set up a Chuvadevi Dularaj Ranka Foundation, a non-profit firm where it fulfills its responsibilities toward the society and the nation. And it is my pleasure to introduce the CEO of Pranjal International Resolution Private Limited, the moderator Vikrant Jain, who will be moderating the session. And for the today's speaker, Mr. Irfan Kazi, he has a 25 plus years of international work experience in alternate investment. He is active in real estate private equity investment at a global and Indian private equity funds such as ICICI Venture, Everstone, AGI Global Real Estate, L&T Infra Investment Private Limited, key investment role in raising 2 of the international fund, aggregating to 450 USD millions in Indus Hotel Ventures in the hospitality and Indospace Logistic in warehousing sector. By qualification, he is a Bachelor in Engineering in Electronics and MMS Finance. He has also completed his ICFAI and is a CFA. With this brief introduction of the today's speaker, I hand it over to the moderator, Vikrant, to take over the session.
Thank you, Snehal. Practically, Mr. Irfan Kazi doesn't require any kind of introduction, but it is a practice to have this thing for a benefit of. So, yes, so now let's begin with this webinar. One thing I can promise you, it will be enriched with the scenario, because currently the only fund in the Indian peripheral which supports the stalled real estate projects is the Swamiya Fund. And this fund is putting a hope for 1500 plus stalled project across the country, where earlier there was a struggle, there was dearth and that disparity among the developers, among the lenders to recover their money, as well as the home buyers which were stuck at large and no hope for this. But a good initiative by Government of India to setting this fund. And this fund is spearheaded by Mr. Irfan Kazi. He is the CIO of that fund. Fund is named the Swamiya. Irfan will tell us more about how this Swamiya acronym and everything is there. So, yeah, Irfan, the first question, this thing to just for the benefit of the larger group, just tell what exactly this fund and how this puts and how it is different from other lots of Indian and foreign funds which are there in the real estate scenario in India. Please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Pranjal Foundation, as well as the other dignitaries who've made this webinar possible. I appreciate everybody taking time out to come and hear us out. We think it's an important message that needs to be widely circulated. So thank you very much for helping us in circulating that. I cannot keep this to be a very short introduction. So Vikrant, you need to bear with me for the next 10 minutes or so, right? It's a long story that I need to, share with everybody. And it's not news, actually. Everybody is pretty aware that sometime in November, precisely on November 6, 2019, the Honorable Finance Minister announced a special window for affordable and mid-income housing, basically to complete construction of stalled projects in this asset category. That's how the SWAMI name acronym has been coined, and that's private initiative that we coined that name. The window was announced to complete stalled projects, and prior to that, just in terms of history, we had done a study across the country, identified that there are about 4.5 lakh unfinished units or incomplete units in about 1,509 projects, and a large number of home buyers stuck in it. The reason I say a large number of home buyers is because while the projects were stuck, they were also largely sold. We found that the projects were about 50 to 60% sold, which meant that it's not just the developer which is in trouble. More than that, there is a large component of home buyers who have bought into these projects and they are stuck. The only two small bits of the study that I think are relevant here are: one, while it's a national problem, it is still localized. So it is primarily in cities like MMR and NCR, Mumbai and Delhi. It is largely in the top 8 cities, so about 85% is in the top 8 cities. And the other bit is that the projects have been stalled for a long time. An average in our sample size for an average of about 2 years plus, which meant that one, a large number of home buyers are stuck in these projects, and two, they have been in these projects for a very long time. So that's when the government stepped in with a fund that is designed with a mandate specifically and only for, and this is important, only for construction and completion of these projects. So the fund has very sharply defined parameters which determine which projects can be considered and which projects can't be considered. So I'll just take you quickly through the 4-5 rules that we have. So one, like I mentioned earlier, it is for affordable and mid-income housing projects, and we define that as projects which are less, or housing units rather, which are less than 200 square meters in RERA carpet area, and everybody appreciates that that's a huge carpet area. So most projects will meet that. Most housing units will meet that definition, and they should be priced at less than 2 crores in Mumbai, less than 1.5 crores in the top 8 cities, and less than 1 crore in the rest of India. So as long as the project meets the size and price criteria, it is an affordable housing project. So that's one criteria. The other criteria is this is a project for completion, and therefore is categorized as a last mile fund. The fund will provide all the capital that is required for completion of the project, independent of any other sources of finance that may be available. So usually real estate projects rely on a very large extent to funding from customers in the form of receivables and when inventory is sold, to maybe funding from banks, etc., or funding from promoters. When we step in, we assume that there will be little or no funding available from all other sources, and therefore, regardless of the market environment in which we live in going ahead, the fund will have enough capital to complete the project. So that's last mile funding. What comes with last mile funding, what comes with the package, is the fact that last mile funding is always senior funding. So we are senior to any other debt that exists in the capital structure of the company, and therefore we are in a LIFO kind of position, which is a lot of chartered accountants on this group will understand that from inventory valuation and concepts like that, which is LIFO. We are last in and we are first out. So that's that. The other criteria very quickly is, one, the project has to be net worth positive, and that's a pretty obvious criteria, right? Unless there are enough cash flows to take care of the cost of construction, nobody would want to revive a project. So by net worth positive, we mean that the cost of construction, or the cost of completion rather, of that project should be less than the value of inflows, which is sold inventory and sold receivables and unsold inventory. One additional criteria and this might come up as a question later, so let me answer it right now, which is RERA registration. So we require that the projects be RERA registered, and if they are not RERA registered, we provide for a timeline for the project to get RERA registration, so that it can happen simultaneously while we do a diligence. So that's the criteria for the fund. I also need to quickly tell you that this is only selection criteria. We have an investment committee, an independent investment committee that takes the investment decisions. We have a large team. We have no geographical focus. So like I mentioned earlier, there are stalled projects across the country, and therefore we are willing to look at stalled projects across the country. We do not have a sweet spot like the lingo that private equity funds generally employ, which is we can do we can do deals up to 400 crores. In fact, there is no minimum stipulated in our documents, but we expect that if it's less than 5 crores, it might not be worth the cost of diligence, etc. So we'll do projects which require funding from anywhere between 5 crores to 400 crores. And with a single developer, we can do multiple projects such that our exposure to that developer does not exceed 800 crores. That's about all that I can remember immediately. And I think Vikrant also needs time to speak up. Thank you. Vikrant, I'm done.
Yeah. Thank you, Irfan, for such an insightful introduction. And yes, you were right. I've started getting questions. So there are questions related to IBC and there are questions at general at large. So we'll keep on picking them. So yes, now we understand at large how the fund was conceptualized and how it's set up and who will get the benefit out of it. So taking it more to the theme of seminar, where I want to understand how they can be a benefit for the cases projects which are stuck in the CIRP, or either they are at the resolution stage or they are at the liquidation stage, and what can be done. So a broader perspective will be grateful here.
Sure. So this fund has been specially designed, and in terms of mandate, we encourage assets that are either NPAs with banks or that are either about to be admitted or have been admitted to NCLT to come to us for funding. We have a special status under IBC, and I don't want to really get into the details of that. But what is enough for the audience to know is the fact that we are actively looking at references from either the resolution professional or from applicants of cases that are already in NCLT and are looking for funding to complete their projects.
Okay. So who can approach you, Irfan, for this? Can it be the resolution applicant can come directly for you, or is it beneficial if the COC approach you, or the resolution professional can intervene and they do? So just elaborate.
Right. So I don't think the COC will approach us. I think it is more, the natural candidate to approach us is, the potential resolution applicant, or a resolution applicant will approach us. At times when there aren't too many resolution applicants and the resolution professional is working also closely in getting a resolution done, we'll have active discussions with both.
Okay. So in case any resolution applicant, before approaching this, he just wanted to have a quick understanding whether the Swamiya fund will support him or not. So is it possible? So though he is not a formal resolution applicant as yet.
Yeah. So yeah, it's possible. Maybe he can send us some details, and we can quickly tell him that it's the kind of case that we would look at, or it doesn't meet our parameters. We can definitely do that.
Okay. And what kind of funding will be here, Irfan? Because the major challenge in CIRP to do the exit of the existing lenders. So I feel that is the basic difference. In the traditional way, the Swamiya fund, outside the purview of NCLT, the existing lender has to take the junior charge. However, in this case, existing lender has to completely go.
Yeah.
And your fund is specific to complete the last mile construction of the project. So will the fund will help them to do the exit for the lender, or it will just, once they are done, it will do the completion of construction as it is always?
So the fund has a very, very specific mandate. It is for construction only. And we define construction, and the definition is very relevant here. We define construction expenses as any expenses that are not related to repayment of financial liabilities. So we can foot just about, or we can consider for funding just about any expense except repayment of creditors, financial creditors in the project. So when it comes to providing funding for NCLT cases, what we are doing, very clearly and distinctly is we are providing construction finance. We are not providing acquisition finance. Acquisition finance will involve buying off the existing lenders at whatever price that the acquirer decides or deems fit. We are not involved in that. We are specifically saying that while the resolution applicant will arrange for funds and buy off the existing creditors in some which way, we are going to provide all the construction finance that is needed to complete the project.
One question I'm getting from the participants is ki, one second. Yeah. In case of CIRP, where the project is there and RERA registration is not done, so whose responsibility is to do the RERA registration? Can it be done by resolution applicant or IP has to do before it comes to you?
So it could be done before it comes to us. We are not going to do it. It could be done by the resolution applicant once he has control of the asset or the entity. It is not so much of a hindrance, when it's done, because once we start actively looking at it, we will tell you to complete the registration process also. Assuming it takes 1.5 months, it's also the time that it would take us to clear the funding for the project, so that the RERA application is in place by the time the funding is ready to go.
Okay. There is a group of home buyers also among us. Today they are one of the audience here. So they putting a scenario. So they say that their project is stalled and it is going under the CIRP currently. So they have made their association of home buyers and they have submitted a plan before the COC to approve this. The COC has approved this and now the plan is for the final approval from the NCLT. So they are asking, can you provide a funding to complete the project?
So I don't have a short answer to it. Let me just explain the situation, right? We are a SEBI registered category 2 AIF. We provide debt and in the form of investment in debt securities. So we subscribe to NCDs issued by a company. Therefore, we cannot provide financing to a partnership firm. We cannot provide financing to a resident welfare association or a society or a trust. We can provide financing only to an entity that can issue debentures. I'll just get into the cost of the financing also, but what's relevant here is to complete the answer to the question. Since we can provide financing only in the form of investment in debentures, what needs to be done is the resident welfare association needs to incorporate a company. The assets need to be transferred to that company. That company can issue debentures. And as part of the project costs, we can also look at the stamp duty implications or the costs that are involved in incorporating a company and transferring the assets to the company.
Okay. So in nutshell, the body in its existing capacity cannot be do. They have to incorporate a corporate, and then they can approach you for this.
So we can fund, we can provide the funding element to any development story. Any development story has a developer, SPV that is developing the project, and a SPV that is developing the project, and a project, obviously. In this case, all we have is the project. What needs to get into, come into the story is a holding company or a SPV, and also some kind of, either a developer or a project management company that will take responsibility. While I can understand that the residents are restless and that the residents are concerned, development and project management is a more involved and complicated task for which we need experts.
Okay. Fine, fair enough. So there are one more interesting question. What I have seen from Swami Fund of my personal dealing with your fund, the project should be considerably constructed and it should be stalled. Now there is a situation in CIRP where the company has went into CIRP and the project is less than 30% completed. Then do you consider it is under CIRP?
Okay, so one of our criteria, and my apologies, I missed out on that while I was talking, is we can fund only brownfield projects. So these are for projects which have started but have not got completed. And rather than going by a visual progress, we've chosen to define a progress in a project as the percentage of the cost of the project that has been incurred. So as long as 30% of the project cost has already been incurred, and whether it's been incurred on land cost or on site infrastructure or on actually building the structure, we are okay. But as long as 30% is incurred, we can look at the project. In your case, if 30% has not been incurred, right, we just cannot look at it.
Okay, understood. Yeah, to going on our original questions, whether who should approach you, and while doing this process, do you require any set of NOC from existing COC to look into the project or to finance it? Because from your this existing arrangement, the reference from the existing lender is one of the prerequisite, where the NOC existing lender is must. Without this, you don't, because they have to take the junior charge. Here the existing lender will no longer be there once you come in. So even to before look into this and to evaluate whether it is possible for you to fund or not, do you require any kind of NOC and permission from existing COC?
No. So that is required only in cases where the existing lender is going to continue to remain an existing lender in the company, except that the existing lender will cede charge and will be junior to us in the capital structure. In NCLT cases, in most cases, and I can almost presume in all cases, the lenders are going to exit the structure. So in that case, we do not require an NOC to look at it, but we still require some feeler that this is the kind of solution that they are looking for. So we need to discuss on what stage we come in and how we proceed along with the COC, so that we don't waste their time and they don't waste ours.
Okay. And typical, we are also an IP firm, and currently we are handling a couple of real estate projects. So what we faced is the immense non-cooperation from the existing builder. Many a time they not provide, and it is real estate is quite different from other industries where the data available. But here, if the project is under construction, your permission approvals are haywire, and many a times it is very difficult to get this information from the public avenues apart from the lenders who have funded this. So in this case, one second. So where the resolution professional himself is not able to get the detail, he is getting half-cooked data, or the data is not much reliable. So if the limited purpose, he can provide the data which he has access to. So how the fund will do due diligence, and how you go for this?
So there's no denying the fact that due diligence might get slightly difficult, right? Compared to cases where data is freely available, where there is a much larger team that has original access to the data and so on. But I suspect that even in such cases, the COC members will already have access to significant amount of documents, which they can make available to us. So, a lot of the mortgages would have happened earlier. They would have a copy of all the bank agreements, etc. So we would have access to some documents. There could be still some difficulties, wherein we do not get a proper perspective of historical developments that have happened. But that's part and parcel of getting into this asset class, and we'll take a view as long to determine if they are deal breakers or not. So there are good things that come on when you take a asset from NCLT, and then obviously there are such difficulties, and we need to learn to live with both.
Okay. One more question from home buyers here, where they want to know with the project having the mixed sample of units. So some units having the price tagged at 1.5 CR and some having the above 2 CR. So how you do, because you don't fund beyond based on the geographical situations you have. So the entire project become ineligible, or you can do the part finance selecting the units. How it is?
No. So we can find many ways of ensuring that we can part finance or really finance the entire project. So one of the things is that when we spoke about criteria of 2 crores, 1.5 crore, and 1 crore for Mumbai, top cities, and rest of India, that is applicable only to 90%. So as long as 90% of the FSI is priced accordingly, we are okay with it. 10% can be shops, 10% can be commercial, 10% can be a higher price penthouses and all that. It doesn't make a difference. That's one. Two, even if that's not the case, we can find, we can explore for different methods in different cases on how do we, subdivide the project so that the final subdivision that we are looking at is such that it meets all our project criteria. So to give a very, very simple example, if there are 3 towers, where the third tower has 3 BHKs and 4 BHKs, and which are outside the price range, and the first 2 towers has 1 BHKs and 2 BHKs, which are inside the price range, we could just consider the first 2 towers. So we can try different, we can try and apply different approaches to try and solve the problem. But in the end, the final project that we are looking at should meet the criteria that 90% of the units should fall in the affordable and mid-income housing segment.
Okay. Okay. There are one.
So yeah. Vikrant, just to add,
yes,
if the project broadly meets, the filtration criteria and the investment criteria that I've specified, and all this is also mentioned on our website, sbicapventures.com. We have a very elaborate FAQ section and application form, etc., there. Okay. If a project broadly meets the investment criteria, then I would suggest you approach us and let us find a way of ensuring that it does meet the criteria.
Okay. One more question, whether the fund can provide as the interim finance to continue the construction while the company is still under CIRP and in the management of RP. So we funding to when the resolution applicant is not being finalized or approved by this. So because interim is provided, and if I am correct, the funding given by Swami Fund, it will be part of the CIRP cost as per the amended IBC code.
So we have no problems in providing the finance. What our immediate concern will be is we are also mandated to complete the construction. So we are not going to come in for a window of time, a month, 2 months, 9 months, and so on. We are going to come in only if we are allowed a window to complete the project.
Okay. One more question, what all cost you will consider include in your funding, and what percentage of funding you will be giving?
So we will fund everything that is related to construction cost, and construction cost includes architect cost, approval cost, FSI cost, sales cost, marketing and brokerage cost, any other kind of regulatory payments that are needed to be done. In fact, we've taken the shortcut way of defining what are construction costs. So any cost which is not related towards repayment of a financial liability is considered as a construction cost. So it's a very broad definition, and anything apart from repaying interest and principal is considered as a construction cost. Now, in terms of what percentage, I mean, that is very simple, right? It comes from our mandate. We are meant to be last mile funders that will complete the project. So we will not rely on any other sources of finance for that. There has to be a very good reason why we aren't providing at least 90% of the financing required.
Okay. Okay. Good. So now see, CIRP is notorious for a lengthy time consuming process. So in compared to where the stall project, where the existing debtor is still having the management control, they can take the decision fast. CIRP is notorious even in the SR Steel case, which had went into 3 years, 853 days precisely. So it is a lengthy process. So let's say if you like the project, you have given your in principle sanction and everything is there, and the final approval from the NCLT takes time. So how long your sanction is valid here, and what will you do? Because by the time you've done your existing due diligence and now 1 year has been passed, so how relevant it is?
So our funding is meant to help. We won't let rules come in the way of act as an hindrance. Even if you give a term sheet which is valid for 1 month and the legal process goes on, we will revive the funding. We will, depending on the length of time, we might require to undertake some due diligence, but that's about it. We will revive the funding and have a, either a fresh look or a quick look again at the project and do the funding. I think what's important here is to elaborate a bit on when do we look at coming in. So there are 2 ways, right? We can, any resolution applicant can approach us if he's interested in acquiring a project from NCLT, and while he pays for all other acquisition costs, he can rely on us for construction funding. But at that stage, we don't have complete information. We'll get complete information only when we start a due diligence, and therefore, what we'll give him is some kind of an in principle approval that on the face of it, we are willing to provide finance to such a project, to complete such a project. On the basis of that, he will approach the RP, or maybe the RP and the resolution applicant are talking to us together. On the basis of that, he'll approach the RP, and then the RP will make available all the resources to us, all the documents to us for us to do a further due diligence. But we will not be comfortable doing a further due diligence till we know that after undertaking further due diligence and giving a final proposal, the COC is, this is not the kind of financing that the COC is looking at. So we should get some comfort that the COC is in principle looking at taking on this kind of funding. So on the basis of our preliminary approval, we will expect that the COC also gives us, some indication, some kind of preliminary approval that it would be comfortable with considering financing from the SWAMIH fund. And once we know that, we can do the extensive due diligence and then give a binding term sheet to the resolution applicant to go ahead and acquire the asset. And therefore, the proposal can then be submitted to the COC for their approval. And once we get COC approval, we can start the project.
Okay. So in SWAMIH fund, I'm aware you go look for a margin because you are the last mile funder, and you take the hit plus you go in the worst case scenario where the probability of timely repayment from the home buyers is very bleak unless and until you complete the project. So that's why you consider no revenue coming from existing home buyers or potential buyers till you complete the project. So that's why you look for mitigate your risk. You look for a good coverage margin or a security purpose. Now, in case of this NCLT, where the project has a drag, and there the margin is thinner in compared to the margin you get in the conventional way. So will this be a hindrance, or is there way out to cover this thinner margin problem?
So while we are looking for a margin, and every lender looks for, a DSCR or a principal coverage ratio or cash at risk ratio and so on, there are no hard and fast rules. There is no golden line that needs to be crossed or anything like that. There is no hurdle rate. The coverage, the cover that we look for will vary according to the specifics of every deal. So for example, in a late stage project, we look for a very thin cover. In a very early stage project, a project which is, let's say, 35% complete and which will take maybe 2 years or 2 years plus to complete, we look for a slightly larger cover. So timeline can be one, risk perceptions can be another determinant. All in all, we will therefore consider all the dynamics of the deal, and there are certain dynamics that come in with NCLT as well. So, there is the cover cannot be compared on an absolute basis across. What I would suggest is what the applicant or maybe the RP needs to look at is broadly, if the cost of construction is less than the total expected inflows, he can come to us, right? And then we'll see on how the numbers stack out, what can be done so that the numbers meet the kind of criteria we have.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, one more query is from the participant side. If the existing lender is ready to shield their charge and provide you NOC, so will the fund become a co-applicant?
No, the fund will not become a co-applicant.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but the applicant, the resolution applicant will then get recognized as a promoter for the sake of RERA as well. Right. We are only a lender. We are a lender that is coming in to complete the construction, and we will retain that status. We will not be an applicant.
Okay. Perfect. That clarifies. Yeah, one more, and that is quite a relevant question. Many a time real estate having lots of projects, and instead of a company at large, they have projects at the multi-location, at the multi-stage and this dimension as well. Some are commercial, some are residential, some mixed, some retails like that. So it generally not possible, or one resolution applicant is not interested for the looking at the company as a whole. So let's say there are 4 projects in the 4 different locations. So is it possible to finance a particular project? Why I'm asking this question, because in resolution plan, you have to ask for a share of you have to take over the existing shareholding also. However, if you're doing a particular project, then you are not taking over the company as a whole, so it changes the scenario. So how, if there anything can be done here?
So we would gladly look at it, right? We are looking at holding companies also in any case. But in this particular case, if there is only one project that meets our criteria, we will ask for that project to be moved into a separate SPV or a company that the resolution applicant already holds. And then once it is moved, we can provide funding in that SPV or the company that holds the project. And we can also help the process by ensuring that the cost of transfer of the asset is built into the project cost, which you are funding.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So what is the general timeline is there to complete, because NCLT or CIRP process itself is notorious to having a larger timeline?
So I can only assure you that our timeline will be faster than anyone else, right? We are dependent on the quality of information that is given to us. For example, you pointed out that maybe in the due diligence process, some vital land documents are not available, or some vital permissions are not available, or they are not immediately available, or they take their time to come. We'll be dependent on that timeline. If things go well, we can take a project from inquiry to funding within maybe 35-45 days.
Okay, it's good that.
And the additional timeline will only be because of external factors, because of the availability of external documents, because let's say the NCLT process took time and so on.
Okay. And do you require any additional collateral charge?
Again, this is a very deal specific question. It's very difficult to give a generalization, but if I have to give a generalization, we do not insist on additional collateral, okay, right? But then we look at that on a, we take a fresh look at that in every deal. So in a deal, if there is an existing lender and we are coming in senior to the existing lender, and if there is additional collateral that has been charged to the existing lender, then we will insist, we won't just ask, we will insist that all the additional collateral also be charged to us, right? In this case also, if there is if there is an acquirer coming to take over a project, we will take a deal view on what needs to be done. How do we need to safeguard ourselves as diligent lenders? That's it.
Okay. So now there is one interesting situation, and I know you informed in your introduction itself, the RERA registration is mandatory. But looking at the dynamic political situations we have, West Bengal doesn't have RERA registration yet. Post this Article 370, now Jammu Kashmir is integral part of India. So however, IBC and NCLT covers West Bengal and Jammu Kashmir, but RERA registration is, RERA, the formation is yet to pending at both at West Bengal level as well as Jammu Kashmir level. So if any developer or any resolution applicant approaches from West Bengal or Jammu Kashmir to again more in the theoretical, more of the Kolkata, another part. So will you be interested in looking at this project, or it's RERA registration is a must for you?
So we are constrained by our own mandate, not by what IBC says or what has happened in J&K, right? Our mandate specifically says that a RERA registration is required. Our mandate will need to be changed if we have to consider those projects.
Okay. And one more problem which we face here is many times existing lenders are resistant in issuing their NOCs, either because of they have to go junior, then payment will come later on, so they have to change their repayment schedule, and it will tantamount to as the NPA in their books. They are not permitted, or they seeing okay, my chance of recovery goes away. So when the project is good and margin is good, and I know the fund is very particular, it will only to complete the construction but not to. But are we considering any kind of part payment allowing to the existing lender? It is in pipeline or something like that?
So let me give a long answer again to that one, right? Yeah. One, if you call up a lender and tell him that, Swami Fund is willing to come in, but you have to see charge, you'll get a very short answer. No, we are not interested. What you need to do is find a solution that will work for that lender. And that's what we've tried to do. So we've approached that in several ways. One, we've decided that we'll share some portion of the cash flows. And all this is applicable primarily to non-IBC deals, because in an IBC deal, at least the existing set of lenders is going away. So apart from us, there's probably no other lender, but there could be a lender who's providing acquisition finance also in IBC deals, right? So we say that if there is an existing lender, we will share some portion of the cash inflows into the project from inventory sales and from receivables with the existing lender. Our funding will be used only for construction, but anything that we get from inventory sales, anything that we get from collection of receivables, we'll pass along maybe 10-20% of that to the existing lender. I repeatedly emphasize the fact, and therefore, I feel I've heard myself say this before, that 10-20% is not just 10-20%, right? It means that 80 to 90% of the cash inflows coming from inventory sales and receivables are going back into construction. They are not coming to us. So during the period of construction, the existing lender is getting 10-20% of the cash flows. The project is getting completed, and we are not getting any cash flows whatsoever. So you need to appreciate that in that relative context, not just in absolute numbers. So that's one. The other bit is, we can also look at, a project has 4 phases. We need to fund and complete the first 3 phases. We can give the existing lender a first charge on the 4th phase. We can carve out some inventory from the TAR so that the existing lender has a first charge on that inventory. So the existing lender continues to get a first charge. The building is getting completed. The project is getting completed. I mean, it can't get better than that. So that's the other thing. The third thing is, not all lenders are, completely unwilling to consider a seed of charge, right? So banks are slightly reluctant, though banks are now, increasingly participating in our funding. In fact, what has happened in the last maybe 15 days or so is, every bank has appointed a nodal officer.
Okay.
A nodal officer who is a Swami nodal officer, meaning that he's the single point of contact for all interactions with the Swami fund. A list of all these nodal officers is again available in the FAQ section on our website. So that nodal officer will interact with us, will already understands our funding, and therefore is in a better place, is better placed to take a decision regarding seeding of charge, etc., can act as our champion within that bank, so to help us get the funding through. So that's one. The other thing is from the point of view of people on this call, right? I said banks are slightly reluctant. A lot of NBFCs are more likely to consider seeding of charge. There are a lot of projects which have been funded by AIFs in the past, and AIFs have really no issue in seeding charge. So if an AIF funded project has reached some kind of difficulty, an AIF is more likely to take advantage of a fund which provides completion funding at 14% compared to their own funding, which is north of 18%. So in a way, they are leveraging on our funding cost as well, and they would be more than happy to see us come in to complete the project.
Okay. Yeah, now I am clubbing 3-4 questions, which again putting the one thing scenario is regarding to what is the cost. So the question coming is, since it is an NCD, so whether it is an IRR based NCD, whether it is the fixed rate of interest is there like the traditional loan way, and secondly, while designing our cash flow and anything, how to consider for this, so how much ballpark they need to take so become eligible, and the cost of funding can smoothly be repayment, and whether the flexibility in the repayment as well.
So there's, more than the cost of funding, it's the nature of the funding that is important. So the cost of the funding is 14%, but that's, slightly irrelevant. What is important is this is a pay when able funding. This is a funding which will be entirely focused on completion of construction. All cash inflows, like I mentioned earlier, will also be diverted to complete the construction. And the funding will be repaid only after, the project is completed. So in most cases, we will not be seeing any cash inflows back to the fund or repayment to the fund to happen for the next 2-3 years. It's only after construction is completed and sales start that we'll start getting to see our money back. And therefore, I think that is very important because it's very flexible, it's entirely focused, and it's 100% focused on construction. The other bit that you need to understand is, how do you compare 14% to what banks do? How do you compare 14% to how a lot of last mile funders, especially foreign funders or other AIFs do? And I say, that comparisons are irrelevant. If there is anyone who's willing to fund the project, we are glad to step back. We do not need to fund the project. We step in only if there is no other funding source available. So if a project has funding available from a bank at 10%, 11% or whatever, right, or even less than that, go ahead, take it. We are not competing with the bank. If the project has funding source from another AIF available, right, and they feel that they need, and they are trying to compare, they will hear from us that if you have a funding available, please go ahead and utilize that. It is only when there is no one else to fund you that we step in.
Okay. Well, very fairly explained. Now, one more interesting query is, do you finance SRA projects or redevelopment projects? Or if yes, then what stage? Because there is no land involved there.
So yes, we do fund SRA projects. Our aim is to provide homes to home buyers. And while a lot of the rehab units won't be buyers, but they still require their homes. They are homeless till they get their homes. So we are looking at funding SRA projects. We understand there are certain limitations with creation of a security in SRA projects, and we are dealing with that. So that's the nature of their asset class, and we are taking a view on that, and we are going ahead with the funding of SRA projects as well. In fact, we have done we have cleared about 50 proposals through our investment committee as we speak. And I think at least maybe 5 or more, or slightly more than that, are SRA projects that will be funded by us.
So, yeah, just elaborating on the previous question. So, what stage you come in, whether the rehab obligation has to be completed or rehab obligation is ongoing, so still you fund?
So, primary indicator is that some sales should have occurred. There should be a large number of home buyers, and therefore we'll come in. And even in the projects we've funded, we've come in at an early stage, even when the rehab obligation is not completed. So obviously, it the project gets de-risked to a large extent if the rehab obligations are completed. But we are willing to take that risk as well.
Okay, understood. Yeah, one more question here. What happens in case of existing lender payment is deferred? So some kind of restructuring and some arrangement is done, and where the existing lender itself has agreed, okay, I'm going to defer the project. And he ready to give you equivalent charge on the project, but a particular portion, like you mentioned in the phase 1 or phase 2, the relevant phases. So in this case, still the NOC is required, where by system itself their payment is deferred and they are allowing you to take further. So in that NOC is required.
Absolutely, we will require NOC and intercreditor agreement with all the lenders in that project, because that will govern behavior amongst the creditors during the time that we are in the project. So we definitely require that. That will also lead to a recognition of our seniority and so on.
Okay. Yeah, the repetitive question, 4th time I'm getting it. What is the processing cost? If yes, how much, and whether you will deduct and give like NBFC does, or they have to shell it out from their pocket first?
So unless you're giving me an idea, but no, we do not have any processing cost. So the only cost is time for us, and therefore what we've done is we have revamped our website. I'm saying that again and again. I don't know, it sounds like a paid commercial, but bear with me. SBICapVentures.com. And there we have a FAQ section with all your questions answered, with the application format and the email ID. So anyone, and that means either the developer, a resolution applicant, a broker, a lender, can if they can't approach the team members directly, or even if they can approach the team members directly, far better to route it through the website. And yes, we have no fees, no processing fees.
Yeah. One thing while interacting with you earlier, the question which asked me one of the builders as well, that there is a commitment charges. So you care to elaborate on that? What is the commitment charges?
Okay, so the commitment charges was something that we were considering in our early days. We have not charged commitment charges, so that was there in the first 2-3 deals that we are evaluating, but that's about it. It is irrelevant now. There is no commitment charges.
Okay, okay, lovely. Yeah. What is the horizon of the entire tenure? What is the repayment period generally you're looking for?
So we generally look at providing for enough timeline to complete the project, and then even more time for sales to happen, because we appreciate, like everybody else will, that this is a stalled project. There are some factors which have resulted in the fact that sales were not happening. Completion of construction will be one major obstacle that goes out, but the location may not be so good. The developer name might not be the kind that inspires so much confidence, etc. So sales will not happen at a very rapid clip. We are cognizant of that, so we provide for sufficient timeline. So in most cases, when a developer comes and tells us that it will take us about a year to complete the project, we assume that it will take maybe 1.5, maybe 2 times that time. So we generally provide for at least 2 years to complete the project, and then at least maybe 3 to 4 years to recover our money back. Okay. And even this is just on the basis of which we make funds available. In reality, what is going to happen is, because the entire funding is available, the developer need not even construct towers sequentially, one after the other. He can start construction on 3 towers at the same time, or proceed with construction on 3-4 towers at the same time. He can proceed with infrastructure work, compound wall work, and so on at the same time, because what used to earlier restrain that initiative was lack of funding, and that is not going to be the case once we decide to fund a project.
Okay, fairly explained. Yeah. Are you finding developers to the payment of statutory dues? One's question, yeah, do you provide funding only to payment the statutory dues?
So we also provide payment for statutory dues. We consider that a part of the project cost. I mean, if you don't pay that, then how can you go ahead with the project?
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Once lots of repeating question again, I will club them. Yeah, one interesting question: how many deals fund have closed so far? If you have the liberty to share.
So we are the most public private equity fund ever, and we are everybody is keeping a tap on the pace of our progress. We have a 2-stage approval process. We have a preliminary IC which provides a preliminary approval, and then when we do external due diligence, and then we provide final approval. So 8 projects have got final approval, 40 projects have got initial approval, and modesty aside, I must mention the fact that all this has happened in the last 4 to 5 months. In most private equity funds, that this would take at least a couple of years or more.
Yeah, one good question. Is there any possibility to get guarantee support from the government, central government, like they are doing in the MSME and this, instead of you taking the security in the project?
So that's a question for the central government, not for me.
Okay. If the project has enough cash surplus, which in future ultimately to take care of the entire construction repayment of fund, but there is not much surplus to repay the existing lender.
Yeah.
You take away the much left for them. So what happens in this case? You allow part payment, so they are aware that okay, we have to somewhere and discount to get out. So how will it?
No. So when we consider the net worth positive criteria and we decide to go ahead and fund the project, we only look at cost to complete the project and what are the inflows. We do not look at underlying liabilities, right? But then there's also the thing that all of this is assumption driven. Let's say we take a price assumption of 5,000 rupees right now, and we see that the inventory is more or less sufficient to complete the project and to repay us. But what will actually happen is, when the project progresses at a very fast pace, when the OC is received, price will appreciate in the future, and therefore there will be enough cash flows left even after we leave the project for the underlying lenders.
Okay, okay. One more question regarding the size. What is the minimum ticket size and what is the maximum cap you have?
So, like I mentioned, we provide funding up to 400 crores. There is no stipulated minimum, but our due diligence cost will be around 25 to 35 lakhs per deal. Now, if you are going to spend about 25 to 35 lakhs per deal, then you shouldn't be looking at funding less than 5 crores. And 5 crores is like you probably need to look at a larger amount of funding. So therefore, 5 crores is the lower limit. Up to 400 crores is what we could do in any single project, and 800 crores with any developer. And what I also need to mention is, there are various costs that we'll include as part of the project cost, which is not generally done. So we will provide funding to a partnership firm if the partnership firm agrees to convert to a private limited company. And whatever are the costs associated with that conversion, we are willing to look at it as part of project cost, and we are willing to fund it. We are willing to fund if there is an intermediary associated with the deal, and there are intermediary fees. And what generally happens is a lot of these projects are by companies which are in severe financial stress. They may not be able to pay the financial intermediary as well, but they need a financial intermediary to complete the project. So we'll regard that cost also subject to some caps as part of the project cost and will be funded by us.
Okay, okay. One good question here. Let's say ki one project is under CIRP and whether you have agreed and in principle okay, after your due diligence also you're getting the satisfaction and you issued your sanction. Natural disbursement happen for the NCLT approvals come.
Yeah.
However, in between there is a litigation and there is a stay from the NCLT. And yeah, there is a foreseen legal opinion also. Okay, over a period the stay will get over and this. So can you feeling safe? So do you finance interim finance till the NCLT stay and LAT stage is vacated, or a project is no for you?
So it will depend on deal specific dynamics, but from what you've just told me, we will wait for resolution of the legal issues before we will fund it. Mm-hmm. So our funding will come to solve the financial gap, or to plug in the financial gap. If there are legal issues, funding does not help solve the problem. So, there is no point in our funding a project which is stalled for legal issues. Once that is aside, we can come in and fund the project.
Okay. One interesting question from home buyers front again, ki the project went because of the promoter went his own way. So had the money been flowed into the project, it would have completed, but the promoter diverted and taken it away. So now once your fund comes in, so how do you ensure that this thing is not repeated?
So everybody's learned their lessons well, right, on this. We are completely in control of the project going ahead. All expenses have to be approved by a project management company which has people on the ground at the project site. So the developer will raise bills. Those bills will be approved by a project management company which has representatives at the site. The representative will have sight on material coming in, on labor working at the site, and so on. So we will know for sure, what has gone into the project. And once that is approved there, it will come to our team and our team will fund it. So it is not like, let's assume we decide to fund a company with 100 crores. We are definitely not going to deposit 100 crores into their account. We are not even going to deposit the money in, 5 installments of 20 crores each. It will be straight away used for settling bills. So at the start, for settling outstanding creditors, so that site mobilization can start. And thereafter, it will be a combination of both invoices raised and physical progress that we can see that will lead to further disbursements. So in terms of disbursements, we'll be very, very slow and stingy, right? It will be only against project progress and expenses actually incurred.
Let's say the Association of Home Buyers, they win a project, they become a successful resolution applicant and then become a company. And but still, nevertheless, they are they are home buyers. They having their personal life and go into, so they cannot pull the full-fledged attachment this thing. So how you ensure, because they are the promoter and you are lender. So how you ensure the smooth? So it's some kind of intervention or management level guidance happens from the Swami Fund in that scenario?
No, so we will require some kind of development management agreement, a DM arrangement, so that the SPV has a developer in charge of the project.
Okay.
That is in their interest as well as in our interest, and we will fund the cost of that happening. So we will remain funders, but we will ensure that there is a development manager, because while the home buyers are concerned, they are still not conversant or familiar with what a developer needs to do in terms of getting approvals, in terms of supervising the construction, in terms of generating incremental sales, in terms of collections, etc. So that's a specialist task of the developer, and we'll expect to have a developer who does that.
Yeah, what kind of DDs you generally do, and it's a internal or you deploy third parties like done by the private equity and NBFCs?
So our internal diligence is business diligence that we do when we get to know of a project for the first time, and that's a very short desktop diligence that we do. We rely primarily on what the developer and or the intermediary is telling us. Once we get a prelim approval, we go for external due diligence. The external due diligence is funded by the developer but is reimbursed by the fund. So the developer appoints external due diligence agencies that we recommend. We see which agencies are appropriate in that particular geography and for that particular function. And then we do all kinds of diligences, right? We do financial diligence, we do legal diligence, we do technical, we do forensic, we do valuation, all the diligences required.
Okay.
And all these are done by external parties.
Who bear the cost for this due diligence?
So it's a tripartite agreement where the diligence agency has to report to us, and the report is only for our benefit. But the cost of the diligence is borne by the developer, and we will reimburse the developer as part of the first disbursement.
Okay, let's take the scenario. In normal case, yes, the builder approaching, they have that kind of funding. But if you're doing the fresh, which out of NCLT and their entire base is your support, because their contribution they already done by acquiring the existing lender. So in that case, some exceptional or some arrangements can be done.
No, we will still require. It's just what we've done in this fund is to ensure that everything is standard and across the board, applied to all the proposals that we deal with. So we will still require that the diligence cost, which will be about 30 to 35 lakhs, not more, right, are borne by the resolution applicant, and then we will fund it as part of funding the total project cost.
I don't know how this question was raised, but an interesting question, so I'll take it. What about the certain approval costs which are funded and paid in cash? How will you deal with that?
So we will not deal with them.
Good. Yeah, the couple of questions I'm getting here, the reliance of what is your take on the future sales projects which are given? So project is stalled, people are relying on the builder. So how you take the scenario if sales is not forthcoming?
So the assumption we operate under, and the view we take is, while sales are currently not happening, they are not happening because there is a crisis of confidence, right? Home buyers have lost trust or faith in the developer's ability to complete the project, and therefore they are not going to buy into an under construction project. Home buyers will buy into a project that is completed. So our first task, in fact, our first marketing effort is to complete the project, right? Once the project is completed, it's a real asset, and therefore there is a buyer, maybe at that price, maybe at a price lower. So we reserve the right to reset the price to get the price lower if it does not sell at that price.
So in that case, you must be doing your sensitivity in the projection itself?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One question key, okay, you've done the due diligence and the borrower, builder has to shell out 35-40 lakhs. And what happens if you decide not to fund? Still you reimburse?
So the decision not to fund comes from what comes out of the diligence process. Right. So if the diligence process points out to some issues that we cannot resolve, right, then we are not then we will not be able to fund the project, and therefore we will not be responsible for the diligence cost.
Okay. So only a successful project, it will be reimbursed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, in the diligence process, if it comes out that key approvals are not there, environmental approval has never been taken, and there are certain statutory requirements which were not adhered to and can't be rectified now, right? If we discover that in the diligence process, the deal breaks down. So that's not our responsibility.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. One second. What is your take on the most famous or most frequently asked question in last 3 months? What is your take on the COVID? Your wonder.
So we need to see, actually, we did a lot of internal discussion on this. And one of the key points that came out was, let's first get out of the, let's first at least get out of the crisis and then see how the industry behaves, right? Right now we are, surrounded by the crisis, and therefore we are still trying to look far ahead on how the industry is going to behave thereafter. Though I'm a firm believer in, it's very easy to make doomsday projections, right? It's very easy to say prices will collect by 25-30% or more. I don't think that will happen. But even as I say that, it's not like I've seen the future. We are here. We'll see how the market reacts going ahead. I think, therefore, our approach is to be very, very conservative. Our approach is to get our work done. And if, it means being very conservative to get our work done, we'll do that.
Okay. One question regarding your initial criteria regarding 200 square meter deadline and this. So,
yeah,
interesting question. What if the revenue tag is good? It's below 1 crore or up to 1 crore.
yeah.
But it's slightly 200 plus. Because the design that way, now they cannot change the design. Will you look or straight away no?
So we'll have to see what percentage of the total project has houses which exceed 200 square meters. RERA carpet area. 200 square meters RERA carpet area in most places should be about, at least 2,800, 3,000 sellable area, right? If the sizes are greater than that, it's hard to call it affordable and mid-income housing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, Meg, I think this question already been answered. This question from different data. What is the maximum funding can be done to a project? I believe you have answered this already. 400 crore is the cap there.
So maximum funding and cost of funding have been answered. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes. Yeah. Let's see more questions I'm getting from here. More or less all builders take some amount of money out of business from their bank funding. How do you deal with such cases in forensic due diligence? And are such cases rejected?
No. The very clear answer is we are providing relief to the home buyers. There have been many reasons why the project has been delayed. That could do, with diversion of funds, etc., that have happened in the past. We are focused on providing a solution for the home buyers. The home buyers have not diverted the money, right? So we are not here to provide capital to developers. We are here to complete homes for home buyers.
Very true.
So therefore, even if the promoter is of a questionable reputation, we will still, make ourselves aware of all the risk involved, and walk in and fund the project with with greater scrutiny and more cautiously, but we will still complete the project.
How the escrow mechanism functions here in your fund?
So we have there is a RERA account, and then there are 2-3 levels of escrow accounts, depending on how many lenders are there in the deal, or if there are any other partners in the deal, or if you have a structure where some assets are another lender has been given a first charge, we take first charge on the other assets. So there is in the last 2 deals that we've done, I've seen 3-4 different kinds of escrow accounts that are there. The idea is to ensure absolute control over the way funds are deployed in the project.
Okay. Yeah, one question from one banker. So the question, it's scrolling down because of the questions. Yeah. As a lender, I have my loan outstanding that the developer needs to repay, and I do have good amount of inventory. So if you are funding for last mile, so how do as a lender I recover my money? Yeah, question I think it's earlier been asked, but came in the different wording. So just for the benefit of the fellow lender.
So I'm assuming that the inventory is development rights, which are, which is an unconstructed form, and therefore there is no apartment to be sold right now, right?
Right.
And therefore you need someone to complete it. We will provide that construction funding, and we will carve out cash flows for you so that you get your, your exposure covered.
Okay. Let's say the question is regarding, let's say, joint land parcel. So on larger land parcel, projects are happening. So first two phases has been completed, sold out, occupied. Now one more thing. So how the land traction happens, or how you consider the land cost of this thing? So extension is carved out, or how it is done?
So we will look at the cost of the land only associated with the particular, and on a pro rata basis, on the part of the project that we are funding.
Okay.
So there are a lot of costs that are prorated while arriving at the project cost, and this will be another cost.
Okay. Do you have any in principle kind of structure before incurring huge initial due diligence? So due diligence happens once you issue your in principle, or it happens after?
No, it happens only after we give our in principle approval. So it happens after we get our in principle approval. We get an in principle approval from the lender, and only then we start spending time and money on diligence.
Wow. In case EIRP, if ED and EOW is attachment, like the attachment is there on the project, will you consider funding?
What will our funding do if there is an attachment?
Good.
So that's the reason why we may not.
Okay. What is the repayment tenure? Yeah, I think all this question has already been asked. Lots of people are asking for your cell number. So I think they have to contend with the official ID, which is there on your website.
No. So I think it's very important that you send us a project brief, and we have a small worksheet that needs to be filled up. For most projects, that won't take more than maybe 20-30 minutes of your time, and email it to us. And therefore, you'll be able to have a more intelligent conversation, right? Rather than telling me about a project that I don't really know anything about.
Guys,
so once you email it to us, we will turn around, and someone from our team will get in touch with you, and try and understand the project better, try and explain what are the information gaps that need to be covered, and what is the way ahead.
True, very true. So, dear participant, this is the answer. That way you can approach SBI Fund, and in addition, Pranjal IP is also there to support you in any way we can. One good question here is, lots of discussion about the pre-packaged insolvency is there, where the lender, where the borrower, where the resolution applicant all come put together, they discuss, and when everything is formalized, then they approach the NCLT, it gets admitted, and it is done. So in a say this is the case where the resolution applicant is finalized in advance before the case is admitted. So if this kind of things happen, will you consider funding?
So, we have not come across a scenario, but I would rather not be involved in that stage. We would rather be involved in once that has happened, and the resolution applicant is looking for funding, then we'll come in, because there are too many considerations that come in before that. We are only funders, and we'll come in only when the funding is relevant, right? The other bit, just to be very clear about it, Vikrant, is that we are looking at deals coming to us from lenders. We are looking at deals coming to us from resolution applicants in this case. We are looking at deals coming to us from developers themselves, or we are looking at home buyers approaching us, right? We do not very clearly have a preferred source. We are looking at all of the deals. In all the deals, probably the first thing we'll do is go back to the lender to check if the existing lender is willing to this, because we need a reference from the existing lender to do the funding. So that's the only thing. But we do not have a preference for an intermediary. The developer can approach us directly. And if he decides to choose an intermediary and approach us, we do not have a preference for any particular, firm or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, one question regarding we are implicating more of the RERA than this NCLT and the scenario, where in RERA traditionally 70% goes into escrow for the completion of the project and 30% is allowed to be withdrawn by the promoter.
Yeah.
So once Swamiya comes into this, will it be the case?
No, we will try to use all the money for funding, right? So we will try to use all the money for funding except the maybe 10-20% that we have pre-negotiated with the existing lenders, which might go to the existing lenders. But for that, all the balance, and if there are no existing lenders, all the money will go into the construction.
Yeah, one request for the repeating the discussion about pre-package NCLT. So for the audience, pre-package NCLT is there where the lender, where the borrower, that is corporate debtor, and the resolution applicants are together. They go, they discuss with the banker. It is like not in the hostile but the friendly manner, the takeover. And since the NCLT gives lots of single window approval, so it is the route preferred in places, and lots of steel and projects are happening in this scenario. So the question here is ki what will happen in case the pre-package is happening, the funds is also available. But sir, the point here is the resolution applicant who is keen to go for the pre-package, they can approach Swamiya Fund, they can have an understanding with them and understand ki whether they will fund. If Swamiya Fund agrees, even in principally, then it makes the faster because it motivates the lender ki they are not doing any needle and haywire stake kind of situation, and it is definitely a short goal which they're going to achieve. One question, when you're going to launch Swamiya 2 with special focus on premium housing, or the focus will remain on affordable and middle only?
So at least our focus is going to remain. We are, maybe halfway through our efforts in terms of the number of deals we can look at, etc., etc. But even as I said that halfway, we've, the size of the fund will increase as we look at more deals. So currently, at least for the foreseeable future, our focus is going to remain on residential, affordable, and mid-income only.
Not even for the affordable commercial?
So no other asset class as of now.
Okay. One question here, again from a fellow lender. What if the company goes into liquidation as a going concern under IBC? Yeah, lots of companies are going as a whole, as a going concern, and the projects are sold individually or independently. In the interest of home buyers, would you consider funding such projects wherein home buyers are willing to pay the balance share of payable? So the company is no longer in existence. It has gone as the going concern, and now there are home buyers, and home buyers is willing to pay the balance cost, balance contribution from their side, and willing to complete this. So how you do?
So I come back to which company is going to issue the NCDs now?
Yes.
There is no company.
There is no company. So again, they have to create a corporate.
Yeah, because we can fund only through subscription of NCDs.
Okay.
So a corporate structure needs to be created.
One question, I think that's not required, but still let's take it. In case where the lender is taken over by administrator, like in case of Altico Capital, will the fund get first charge? Or will you fund, or we're ready to work on pari passu?
So we will, we are willing to look at it. What we've also seen in the past, and my understanding is that may not be true any longer, is that we were not getting a response in terms of lenders NOC. Okay. If we start getting a response, so naturally our efforts are focused with lenders who are responding faster to our NOC requests, right? If we start getting a response from those lenders, we'll more actively pursue deals that have those lenders as one of the earlier funders in the project.
Okay. Yeah, it was an insightful session and question. There is no even the thinner streaming from the questions are coming. They're coming and coming, but due to the time limitation is also there. We are approaching 4:20 already. So I request everyone to put your question or proposal directly to Swamiya Fund website, which Irfan has already shared. If we can be of any help, the resolution@pranjal.co.in is the place where you can put up your query, and we'll try to sanitize it and help you to bridge your network with the Irfan and Swamiya Fund and help you in any manner that is there. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Irfan, for this.
Great.
Now, I request my partner, Mr. Ankur Jain, he is the promoter of the Pranjal Group, to put a vote of thanks for Mr. Irfan and audience at large. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor, Irfan. I would like to thank Irfan for taking out time and being with us this afternoon. The talk was immensely insightful, and I would acknowledge that it was quite enlightening for all of us, taking us through the nitty-gritty of this fund in detail for the benefit of the real estate sector stakeholders at large, and more specifically the home buyers and resolution professionals who are here in the balanced participations. The responses to the questions, clarifications sought by participants were absolutely clear and convincing. I'd like to place on record that the fund is well conceived in the first place and is doing a wonderful job. And we are privileged to contribute to the knowledge sharing initiative through this webinar. I thank once again all the participants here for taking out time this Sunday afternoon, and wish you all the best. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you, Irfan. Thank you, your team.
Great. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to explain the fact that we are available to fund NCLT projects, and we would like to see, we would like to be partners with resolution applicants going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Commendable. We got 240 plus audience. So yes, Irfan, there are lots of interest in your fund from the people. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.